is accompanied by this evening. I'll just want to share a quick background on the inspiration of the webinar. So in 2020, I started a small research project on the impact of extracurricular activities on learners in general in terms of learner efficacy and performance. And interestingly enough, I also found out that in most contexts, in the American context rather, because that's where I found more research data on, that learners who participate in extracurricular activities tend to attract more private donors, right? And at the beginning of the year, I think Prof. Wachels and Tando would remember we had an issue in higher education regarding funding, student funding, right? And a sudden interest sparked in me to find out whether is there a link between the South African learner who participates in extracurricular activities and attracting private funding. So I'll just quickly go into it and sort of ask Prof. Wachels to sort of give us a breakdown of the whole psychology behind participating in extracurricular activities. So, and then from there, we'll be speaking to Ms. March Brown and some of the girls from Bodine who are accompanying here on their experiences. And then we'll be talking to Mr. Jeremy Gibbons from Jake's Scarborough Fellowship from the private donor sector. Then we'll be speaking with Thando Mtimkulu from the university SRC sector. Just to give a quick introduction of Salome Human-Wachel has been a registered educational psychologist for more than 2 decades and is an associate professor in the Department of Education Psychology at the Faculty of Education at the University of Pretoria. She is currently also the Deputy Dean of Teaching and Learning in the Faculty of Education, where her portfolio includes monitoring student access, success and throughput, as well as coordinating accreditation and quality assurance of programs in the faculty. She is also tasked with overseeing curriculum transformation in the Faculty of Education and coordinating efforts to improve student learning. The second panelist is Jeremy Gibbons, who is representing Jake's Scarborough Fellowship. By profession, Jeremy is a teacher and was a principal at Pinelands High School in Cape Town. He currently sits on the board of the Jake's Scarborough Directorate. And we have March Brown. March Brown is a world-renowned teacher, one of the top 10 finalists for the Global Teachers Prize, and is, as far as I know, was the president of the South African History Teachers Association. Marge also oversees the Model UN debate at her school, which is Rodin Girls High. Marge is accompanied by 3 of her learners, Almaz, Rachel, and Sanjika. And lastly, we have Thando Mtimkulu, who is a master's student at the University of Pretoria and a member of the UP SRC responsible for the culture portfolio, and is the ex officio member and archivist of the Student Culture Committee. Thando also works as a facilitator and assistant at the UP Javed Arts Center. Interestingly enough, Thando also graduated with his education degree in 2018. Those are all the panelists for this evening. To quickly jump into the discussion, Prof. Wachel, I want to know, how does participating in extracurricular activities impact learners' self-efficacy?
Thank you, Boitshoko, for that question. I think what we need to perhaps consider in talking about learner psychology and extracurricular activities is maybe to really go back to an analysis of exactly what it is that we're talking about. And of course, when we're talking about extracurricular activities, I think what we are really referring to are activities that we participate in our leisure time. Sometimes we also talk about the things that we do in our discretionary time. And we can talk about things that we do in our spare time. And those activities, of course, will involve things such as sport. It will involve such as things as cultural activities, but I also think we need to keep in mind that it will refer to activities also such as personal development activities. And so I think when we talk about learner performance, we also have to have clarity on what it is that we mean when we talk about learner performance and why is psychology relevant to that. The first thing, of course, that we normally think about is academic performance. It is an interest for us to understand what improves academic performance. And so therefore, the relationship between extracurricular activities and academic performance is a particularly interesting one. But I think increasingly and most certainly in the last 18 months, what has increasingly also come to the fore and being emphasized more is the role that participation in extracurricular activities, as we refer to them in terms of leisure time and sport activities and participation, the impact that that has on our mental health, the mental health of learners, and of course their well-being. I think that in relation to that, apart from mental health and well-being, I think we also need to consider the role that these activities play in increasing motivation for academic performance and being able to sustain motivation for academic performance. And we can probably unpack that as well to sort of understand exactly how it works. I think that there are some direct effects and there are some indirect effects that we can see happens through extracurricular activities and academic performance. I'm not sure if you would like me to continue discussing those aspects, or whether you possibly have another question that you would like to ask.
Okay. So the second question links to what you were about to discuss further, and looking at how they actually boost the overall performance overall in terms of the holistic learner, a learner that will leave the basic education system from their matric year, a learner who is fully developed. So could you kindly sort of help us understand the whole process?
Okay, thank you for that question. So I think that what I would like to mention is that first of all, we understand, I think all of us, that participation in extracurricular activities, particularly where those involve sport activities, but it might also be outside or outdoor activities, definitely has a direct physical impact on the body of learners. So I think those are the effects that we are very familiar with. So we know that sport and active lifestyles have a positive impact on blood pressure and keeping blood pressure down. There's also a lot of research that shows that even a short walk, for example, or moderate activity of 20 minutes or so can boost the ability to concentrate and increase learner performance. But I think there's also more interesting research that shows that participation in sport and extracurricular activities, therefore, do not only have sort of these broad effects on physical health, but it also has a very direct effect on the brain. So if you look at some recent findings in studies where they have used MRI scans, we see that, for example, very recent research showing that something as little as weekly outdoor walks can have a direct impact on the region of the brain that is involved with planning and self-regulation. There's also research in older adults, but I think it also, for our purposes, is important to take note of that. There's also research that shows that social activity is associated with larger brain mass in older individuals. So we see that participation generally in outdoor activities and physical activities have these direct physical, positive physical effects. But I think what is really important to take into consideration, of course, is also the psychological impact. And the psychological impact may be a little bit more indirect, but I think we know that exercise and participation activities reduces stress, it enhances mental health and well-being. If we look at motivation and we look at the basic sort of needs, psychological needs, we know that participation in extracurricular activities also offers opportunities for people to exercise autonomy, for people to develop a sense of competence, and also to satisfy people's needs for a sense of relatedness, for having relationships with others and benefiting from those social relationships with others. And then, of course, I think we also need to consider the skills and the competencies that people can develop through extracurricular activities. We can consider, for example, intrapersonal skills, self-management skills. I've already referred to self-regulation and planning and how the brain is directly positively impacted by that. We should consider also the interpersonal relationship skills that we develop, particularly when we are doing team sports or when we are involved in activities where we have social interactions with others. If we look at a very specific group of people, for example, we have the Olympics, of course, that is happening, and we know that high performance athletes and participation in high performance sport definitely teaches skills and attitudes such as persistence and grit and perseverance. I think the research has also highlighted the fact that leadership capabilities develop through our participation in sports as well as team collaboration. So you've got all these skills that develop through participation in activities that we do in our leisure time and that we do in our discretionary time. And I think the main thing there is that you mentioned earlier the relationship that interests you in terms of private donor funding and extracurricular activities. And personally, for myself as a Deputy Dean in Teaching and Learning, if I look at students who participate in extracurricular activities, it tells me quite a lot about them. It tells me that this is a person who values themselves because they invest in themselves in terms of their health and their mental wealth and well-being. It tells me that a learner who participates in extracurricular activities is a well-rounded person and probably appreciates the importance of having balance in their personal lives. It tells me that it's probably a person also who can recognize the bigger picture and know that it's not just about academic performance and narrowly focusing on work and only some aspects of achievement, but they are interested in a more holistic well-being and development of themselves. And probably it will also be a person who has healthy coping skills, someone who's able to set and maintain priorities. So if I look at those skills that one automatically assumes comes with participation in broader areas of life that are represented by extracurricular activities, it's usually someone that I would want to invest in because I can see that they are already investing in themselves.
Thank you so much, Prof. Wachel. Not to quickly jump on to Marge. Marge runs rather facilitates the Model UN debate at Rodin High School, right? And with Prof. Wachel talking about the development of learners holistically rather, in terms of collaborating, working in teams, and the general growth and the prospects of employability, or rather getting private donors, I want to ask what are some of the challenges that you've encountered as a Model UN facilitator, Ms. Brown?
So I was thinking of this question, and I don't think there are as many challenges as there are rewards. The challenges are within a school life. The fact that you get these wonderful students who are trained up and become really skilled at Model UN, and then they leave, they matriculate, and you have to start all over again. And you are left every year with this skills deficit as a school in terms of team building and knowledge. And then you have to build up another group. But that is really the nature of teaching. And if I think of the huge opportunities that Model UN has brought for these students, those opportunities and skills don't end when they leave school. In fact, they really do continue, and Sanjika can give an example of a fellowship that she just got emailed recently, and I'd really rather talk about the rewards rather than the challenges. But for me, the big challenge also is finding teachers who have passion to put into extramurals, because school life in itself is quite challenging. And I've coached Model UN at Rodin for 10 years, and before that at my previous school. And it's been really challenging, because I'm facing retirement, to find someone who's actually willing to take it on, because it does take an enormous amount of time and support. But I do it because I find it incredibly rewarding and exciting. So I don't know if that really answers your question. Really, the two questions are just, replacing the skills as the students leave, but that's the nature of education. And then finding somebody to replace me when I retire. Other than that, there are not many challenges. It's really just incredibly rewarding. I don't know if you want to talk about the rewards, Boitshoko.
Yes, I was about to ask, what are some of the rewards of being a facilitator? And does it really, because the room is full of aspiring teachers, does it really help an individual grow professionally in the education or in the teaching?
So I don't do Model UN to grow myself. I am absolutely passionate in growing young people into becoming global citizens, because I do believe that the world is a global village today, and that our students, if they are to cope within society, they really need to not only know their place within our community, but they need to develop empathy and diplomacy and confidence within the world. And I cannot think of a better extracurricular activity than Model UN for doing that. So very, very quickly, Model UN is a simulation exercise of the real United Nations, where a particular issue or topic is set to the students within one of the subcommittees of the United Nations. And the students work in teams. In some of the UN leagues, in others they work alone. And they are given the topic, the issue, and then they are allocated a country. And they have to then research that issue or topic through the eyes of that country, not through their own views or their own opinions. And what this does is it forces students into understanding how that country feels about the issue and what that country's stance is on the issue and why. And it includes political, social, economic, historical reasons why different countries would take different stances on issues. And then more recently, because of the Sustainable Development Goals, a lot of these topics are rooted within the SDGs. So it means that the students actually understand the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals as a way of bringing countries together to try and reshape the world so that that every country takes into account people, the economy, and also the environment. So my pupils are not only becoming global citizens and understanding why different countries have different stances on an issue, but they also understand that the issue will not be resolved without teamwork, without diplomacy, without first world and third world countries learning to listen to each other and find ways forward. And the whole aim of Model UN is to try and get people to reach some form of consensus as a way forward through a resolution being passed. And that resolution might not solve the whole issue, but it's a step forward. And that's what diplomacy is all about. So the Prof spoke a lot about the benefits of extracurricular and the leadership it creates. And I've just seen enormous leadership within my student body through Model UN, incredible confidence, knowledge about the world, a sense of social justice, and then also becoming a critical thinker and trying to, through debate and diplomatic caucusing, finding ways forward in a world that often looks to conflict and war. Model UN teaches students to look for common solutions and find ways forward to prevent war. So I can't think of a more powerful tool to create global citizens. And some of the students have gone on to get scholarships with DIRCO, the Department of International Relations Cooperation. And one of my students represented South African youth in the climate action talks in Paris because she had done Model UN at school and then went on to do Model UN at a university level. So the exciting thing is that Model UN is not just a school extracurricular, it really is also at university. And if you go to America, students who do Model UN debating at university level actually get places in reses that are reserved for Model UN teams. So it's really big in countries like the States. Having said that, the students that are on the panel with me tonight, Rachel, Sanjika, and Almaz, have also been on international panels through Model UN, talking about climate action, talking about children in policy making, and I'll leave it to my students to talk about just exactly where Model UN has taken them as school children. But just to say, a person like Almaz, who's in grade 9, in the last 2 years has sat on high-level policy-making committees internationally, probably about 10 of them, and often the only student in the room with professors and doctors. And if that doesn't build confidence, then I don't know what does. So I'll stop there unless you've got other questions, because I think it would be good for you to listen to the students.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me quickly pose some questions to the students. I'll start with Rachel. Rachel, Ms. Brown talked about intellectual development, you having to encounter some high-level information, having to sit with world leaders discussing the sustainable development goals and other policy making, and having to step out of being Rachel, a South African citizen, to being a citizen of a particular country. So the question is, how does that particular activity help you develop intellectual, or rather, how does it impact your intellectual development as a learner?
Yes, no, definitely. I think being a part of Model UN has taught me so many skills that I wouldn't have learned in the classroom, but I think are so valuable. It has taught me how to have discussions, and when coming to a discussion where you both have your own interests, how you can come to a compromise and come to a combined solution so that you can work together. And I think that's a skill which is very important outside of just Model UN, but within the business world, and those kind of spaces, of coming to combined solutions and compromises. It has also taught me how to research and how to, I think, turn what I've researched into a document to present, and how to summarize it, and how to write formal speeches has been an important part of Model UN, and how to present them as well. But another big part of what Model UN has taught me is impromptu speaking, of being able to think of on the spot and create, like, have your prepared ideas, but have the discussion of where you're at that point and bring new information in from where you are. And I think I really have seen how all of this has benefited me in school. Like, on a personal level, I've seen how my marks have improved in English and geography from all of these skills. And they're such important skills, and skills that I will use in the future, and that I've used outside of school in some of the other projects that I've been a part of.
Thank you so much. That was a proof enough that you are going to be one of the world's leaders who will be sitting in the United Nations chambers at some point. To move on to Almaz, Ms. Brown mentioned that you are in grade 9, and I'm assuming that you started with Model UN debate, the Model UN debates when in grade 8. Having to transition from primary school into a high school environment, and taking on an extra curricular activity, what are some of the challenges that you have had in terms of participating in the Model UN debates?
I think besides the obvious challenge of managing my time with Model UN and extracurricular activities and school, and sometimes sacrificing Friday evenings and Saturday mornings for debating, initially I found Model UN very challenging because I was coming in as a grade 8 and I had no experience writing papers and debating and researching. And I was being held to the same standards as grade 11s and grade 12s and sometimes university students. And most of the time with Model UN, you have to research quite a lot in a small amount of time. So I had to learn techniques to consume information, a lot of information in a short amount of time. And I think once I mastered some of these challenges, it gave me a great tool to use in school and in everyday life. And as Mrs. Brown said, confidence is very key in Model UN. And I also had to, a challenge for me was gaining confidence as a younger student to just put myself out and volunteer. And I realized that when you put yourself out and expose yourselves to expose yourself to many new experiences, then you learn so much more than you would in school, for example. I think, for example, last year, I I think early last year we had a Model UN debate on food security, and me and Rachel were actually on the same team, and we were discussing. Oh, and Sanjika, me, Rachel, and Sanjika were all on the same team, and we were researching food security in Canada. And you would think the poorest country would only have food security issues, and a rich country like Canada would have no food security issues. But when I started researching for the Model UN debate, I found that Canada also had food security issues because there were communities living in very remote areas where food could not really be transported to. And I even found that there was a cultural aspect to food security because these remote communities were being given food like vegetables, and it was foreign to their traditional diet, made largely of meat. And by learning through this hands on approach, I learned so much more than I would in school. And about the intersectionality of many of the subjects that I do in school and how culture, geography, and climate change even affect food security. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Almaz. Moving on to Sanjika, right? Hearing that you've been participating in policy making, and you, Almaz, I'm grateful having sat down or having worked on aspects of food security and many more other aspects as a model UN debater. How does engaging with high profile individuals and on some of the pressing global matters like food insecurity impact your career outlook?
Yeah, so I think what Imyan's really given me is that we hear about concepts about food security and stuff like that in biology and in geography and all our subjects, but then seeing us actually work together with people to try to come up with solutions, not just on food security, but how to combat climate change and using renewable energy in our everyday lives. And when you speak to high profile individuals, you kind of realize that we as the youth have these like really big ideas, but it kind of puts you down in retrospect a bit that they're not as easy and as quick to accomplish as we really want them to be. So I think it's given me, especially as like an 18-year-old now going into soon varsity, hopefully, it's made me realize what the real world really is like and how my things that I've learned in school has actually been kind of building stones and stepping stones for me to learn from and grow from here. I also think that with MUN, it kind of allows me to branch out from the kind of STEM subjects that our school does focus quite a bit on. And it gives you a bit of a better outlook into other fields like law and policy making. So I think it helped me make me a balanced individual. And yeah, but speaking to all the high performing individuals, it can be intimidating. But yeah, it kind of builds character. It makes you really look at how you speak to people, how to be really polite, and how to kind of be patient and grapple with everything.
Thank you so much, Sanjika. Ms. Brown, jumping back to you, after seeing how participating in the Model UN debate has had such a tremendous impact on your learners, how would you advise a no-fee school on establishing extracurricular activities in their school, seeing that you have done work with some of the no-fee schools in the surrounding areas through your Macmillan quiz projects?
So, you know, the students, these three students on this panel do model United Nations debating within a very broad sector of schools. The league that they participate in at Wits University, Wits University's Department of International Affairs, which is called SIA, the South African Institute for International Affairs. It's attached to the International Relations Department at Wits. And they offer a league that brings my students into active engagement with students from all backgrounds. So state schools are by far the majority of the schools that participate in the SIA Model United Nations debating. And Wits will offer transport, funding for poorer schools to get to Wits for the debating when it's not online, when, you know, pre-COVID, the debates were all face-to-face. They also offer students at university who are studying international relations as coaches for schools where the teachers might, A, not really know much about international affairs, or B, the school might not have a lot of devices for the students to do research. So teachers and students are offered a Wits international relations student as a coach, or they are also invited to go to Wits and do research at the library, the SIA library. So when we debate across the board through Wits University, the students, it's a great leveler, because our students, as Almaz said, interact with students from state schools, university students. So my kids will often debate against Wits University, UJ, University of Pretoria, and they take on university debating teams as well as school debating teams. But what's really been fabulous for my students is Rachel, for instance, and Almaz are part of a student group organized by Wits called Youth at Sire, which is a youth policy network. And that involves kids from Greenside High, from Parktown Boys, from Parktown Girls, from schools in Pretoria, schools in Hammanskraal, you name it. And it really has been a fantastic exchange of ideas. And Rachel was one of the students that landed up drafting the climate action plan for the city of Johannesburg. And now Rachel and Almaz are part of the youth policy statement for COP26, which will be in Edinburgh next year. So there are all these international and city activities that involve kids from rich and poor backgrounds. And this is a wonderful activity that really levels the playing fields from a class basis. So I would encourage teachers from no matter what school you land up in, to just connect with Wits, because Wits really bends over backwards to level the playing fields, make coaching available, make transport costs, covered, and make sure that there aren't students that can't participate because of lack of resources. So Boitshoko, I don't know if that answers your question at this stage, but it's really, I would say, just jump in, get involved, because the more you get involved as a young teacher, the more you get drawn into this wonderful network of passionate teachers who bring their kids back year after year, and it's not dependent on resources.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brown. To move on to Jeremy Gibbon, who's joining us all the way from Cape Town. Like I said earlier on, Jeremy sits on the board of the Jakes Gerwel Fellowship, which is an example of a private donor, if I can put it like that. And after hearing how Bochels and Ms. Brown, Sanjika, Almaz, and Rachel have properly articulated how learners, if not students, who participate in extracurricular activities have so much more to offer, does that really sway, or rather does it impact the likelihood of a learner being funded by a private donor such as your organization?
Thanks, Boitshoko. Thanks for inviting me, and a pleasure to be able to speak to you. Great topic, and I bring, I suppose, a perspective from a previous school principal, as well as currently working with the Jakes Gerwel Fellowship. So let me offer both perspectives. Firstly, as a principal, I know, Marge, that you are beaming with pride to hear, three of your students speak so eloquently. And certainly as a principal myself, I would bend over backwards to encourage students around extramural activity. And that was just based on years and years of experience of seeing those students that were actively involved at school or beyond school extramurals developed a different a depth of their own personality. They're more well-rounded. They often developed better coping skills. They were more engaged in school, and they were just more interesting, quite honestly. And so we would talk quite a lot about what we called the 3 Ps, and they weren't ours. We borrowed them from someone, and I confess I can't remember who, but that's not really the point. We spoke about this idea of developing as a young person, starting off as play and moving on towards passion, and then getting on towards discovering what your purpose is. And there's an important continuity there. So as a younger child in primary school, the focus should be on play, of not being too serious about things, but just having fun, enjoying activities. As you start to get into your teenage years, the focus shifts towards identifying what you're passionate about. What do you love doing? And you can't do that unless you do things. And so the encouragement was to try out things, try play squash, try United Nations, try Scouts, whatever it might be, so that you can have multiple experiences and opportunities and understand your passion. And as you then mature and complete your education, that passion often ends up driving what your purpose becomes. And so that was really kind of a push around this idea of being involved beyond just what the curricula determines, but pushing into these areas of extracurricular activity. And if I kind of shift gears now a little bit, Boitshoko, to include the perspective you've given me in terms of a scholarship provider, for me, the focus is what skills and competencies does a particular young person develop as they engage in these activities. The prof described beautifully the way in which these kind of activities are the things one does in your discretionary time. And for me, that tells a story. What do you choose to do when you don't have to do something? And as you discover your passions and you do these extracurricular activities, it tells me a story about who you are. So I think that as you develop those things, you develop a series of skills. Some of them are obvious, maybe things like public speaking, debating. We've heard a lot about that. It may be less obvious. You develop a certain sense of confidence. Maybe you develop a greater empathy towards people. Maybe you develop the skills of working with people that are not the same as you. Skills in managing diversity. Those are very, very important, very sound skills that we all need, but maybe aren't quite so obvious. And I like the analogy of developing this kind of proverbial backpack of skills as we go through our lives. I think we're all clear that we are well past the idea that you train to do one job and then you then have that job for life. I like to think of a backpack of skills that I develop, and these extracurricular activities add to my backpack of skills. And I may have a job, I may start an entrepreneurial business, I may do all sorts of things that require me to dip into my backpack of skills. So let's talk about scholarships. When you apply for a scholarship or when you apply for a job or any opportunity, there's this funny game that gets played. The group offering the scholarship or the job have certain requirements in mind, and they do things to you to try and see whether you suit those requirements. So they do things like make you fill in an application form or make you come for an interview or a variety of things. And the game that gets played is the scholarship providers are trying to see, do you have these certain characteristics or qualities or competencies that we're looking for? And for me, the idea of extramural activity is the perfect way for applicants to demonstrate that they have these particular qualities. And so if we bring it specifically to the Jace Clavel Fellowship, we look for particular competencies. Let me name 3 of them. We look for academic excellence. Now that's quite easy to measure because there's certain kind of obvious measurements that we could use, like your exam results at school. That's one obvious measurement. In an unequal education system like ours, it's not a terribly good one because often your rather than your innate ability. So we match that with certain other psychometric tests. We use a particular one that looks at learning orientation and your ability to learn new things, which is independent of curriculum. So that would be one way of us getting some information from an applicant. We're also interested in leadership ability. Now, how do you test that? Well, you ask students for examples of where they've shown leadership. And if in your extracurricular activities you have shown leadership in a particular way, you can then use that to demonstrate that particular quality. And at J. Scoville Fellowship, we've actually developed a methodology where we assign a certain scoring matrix to different options, things like Model UN, things like Scouts or community involvement or involvement in religious organizations. All of those kinds of extramural activities for us demonstrate certain competencies, and we then score those and we use that as part of our selection process. And so for me, it's a no-brainer. Organizations offering scholarship opportunities, offering job opportunities, internships, whatever it might be, are desperately interested in students who use their discretionary time to develop extracurricular activities, and in particular where those activities then tell us a story about the kinds of things that you like doing, the kinds of things that you're good at, and the kinds of things in which you can demonstrate certain competencies that are aligned to what we're looking for. So I hope that answers your question, Boitshoko. I'm going to pause there because I think time's running away.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. That answers the question. Now to quickly frame the discussion on a university space, I'd like to jump over to Thando Mthimkhulu, who's joining us in Pretoria, or rather from Pretoria. Thando, I want to know what are the prospects of learners who participate in extracurricular activities in the higher education spaces like the University of Pretoria?
Boitshoko, thank you so much for the invitation, and it's such an honor to be part of this panel. But yeah, so the prospects for a learner coming into the higher education space and then becoming a student and ultimately then becoming an employee, there are a lot of prospects for this learner coming through the system. I mean, as Mrs. Brown has said, you know, you develop these students in the school environment and they participate in things like Model UN, or they participate in sporting activities, and as Prof. Human-Vogel has put it, personal development kind of activities, which are things like your community engagement, things like your religious societies. And they come into the university system and there's this kind of idea that this all ends and it stops, which is very inaccurate. These things are part of a vibrant student life, and a vibrant student life is part of creating a holistic student, and the holistic student then goes on to be the best employee, I guess, if you look at it that way. So these things are very much part of university life. So I can say to the wonderful three ladies who spoke, the young ladies, that we do have Model UN at varsity level, and I think, and as Mrs. Brown has said, they are, you know, institutions like WITS having the programs that they're running. We have similar programs running at the University of Pretoria. So extramural activities or extracurricular activities are a huge part of the university life. There are countless clubs, societies, and choirs and things that students can join. And these actually, like Jeremy has so put it so beautifully, it really speak to your development as a person and kind of communicate that you get these skills by participating. I always say to people when they ask me, Thando, why should I participate in extracurricular activities? I mean, school is stressful enough. And I say, firstly, when you apply for a job, there are very few or almost no employers who say, please submit an academic record and that's it. They say, please submit a CV, and in your CV, you're going to put all the things that you've participated in. And that speaks a load to the employer. They look at, what skills am I bringing on board? For example, teachers who have participated in sporting codes or cultural activities at varsity are more likely to be hired because they bring an added value, because they go on then to become coaches and they go on to become facilitators, as Mrs. Brown has mentioned.
Thank you so much. Does participating in extracurricular activities in a high school level, or at high school level, does it really increase the chances of getting funding opportunities like sports scholarship or cultural scholarships in the university space?
100%, that is true. I mean, Jeremy has nodded to that already, but it also, yes, it does. So just to answer your question very bluntly, yes, it does. There are countless scholarships that require some participation in extramural activities. There are scholarships that are designed specifically for participate in certain things. For example, we've got sporting bursaries. So I know that Tuck Sports gives scholarships to students who have good academic marks, and they also participate in some other sporting code, and then they go on to join the Tux or the UP sporting club that runs the code. So we see a lot of students who participated in rugby in high school go on to join Tux rugby when they come to UP. And I know that's the case with even private institutions. I know Varsity College does a similar thing where they offer sporting bursaries to students who display particularly strong sporting skills. The National Arts Council has something similar. I know APSA has something similar. So again, like Jeremy has said, bursaries and scholarship providers don't just look at your academic performance. They look at the holistic person. And as Prof. Human Vogel has said, is that, you know, I can invest in you because you're already investing in yourself.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that question, asking on the availability rather, or to pose the question properly, do we have sports or culture-oriented scholarships at the University of Pretoria?
Yes, we do. We've got the Tuck Sports, wow, it's a lot of S's, a Tuck Sports bursary, which again, like I've mentioned earlier, looks at specific sporting codes, and they headhunt students, or you can even apply. Then we have bursaries or scholarships that come through our youth choir and the Tuck Camerata. So if you are part of the youth choir and then go on to join the Camerata, there are some incentives there. So there are, these things do exist specifically at UP.
Thank you so much for that. There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. That brings us to the end of this absolutely fascinating discussion that we just had. And I'm thankful to see that we have amongst us aspiring students, aspiring teachers and students, and some of the people who
I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I've lost Boitshoko.
Same on this side, Prof.
Yeah, we can't hear him.
Oh, I'm back. Sorry about that. I fell off once again. But I was just giving a vote of thanks to all the important people that are here. I know Prof. Bochels had commitments, and I'm thankful that you managed to slot me in. Ms. Brown, I know you are enjoying your holiday. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, and I hope to continue this conversation on a broader scale in the future. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure, and thank you everybody for giving me and the students an opportunity to be part of this. I think it's such a wonderful discussion, Boitshoko. Thank you for initiating it.
Yes, similar from my side. Thank you for arranging this. It was really fascinating to listen to everybody's contributions. And if you think about arranging webinars like these as one of the extracurricular activities that one can involve in, you can already see how many skills you have to learn trying to manage all the technological advances. So well done to you, Boitshoko.
Thank you so much, Prof. Bochel.
Thanks, Boitshoko. Bye.
Bye, everyone.